There is a silent fear most people carry, tucked so neatly beneath their routines that they barely notice it until something shakes their world. A fear that whispers the same haunting question: what if I'm already too late? Too late to begin, too late to rise, too late to become the person they once believed they could be. It's a strange kind of pain, not sharp, not dramatic, but quietly corrosive. It shows up at night, it shows up at birthdays, it shows up in conversations where someone casually mentions what they've achieved, and something inside you sinks. Not because you envy them, but because you wonder what happened to you, where your momentum went, where your clarity disappeared, where your spark hid itself. You don't say it out loud, but the thought comes anyway. I should have been farther by now. And yet, here's the beautiful, inconvenient truth. Your life isn't behind schedule. You're simply awakening later than you expected. But awakening late is not a flaw. It's a sign that something deeper is forming beneath the surface. Modern culture has sold us a brutal myth that greatness is a young person's game, that your value peaks early, that if you haven't made it by your 20s or 30s, the window is closing. But who decided this? Who planted the idea that human potential has an expiration date? You won't find that idea in philosophy. You won't find it in psychology. You won't find it in the lived reality of the people who transform the world. You find it in trends, in industries addicted to novelty, in a culture that mistakes speed for success. But the truth? Speed can create noise, but depth creates impact. And depth takes time. The person you are today carries layers you didn't have before. Patterns you've recognized, failures that softened your ego, disappointments that strengthened your intuition, experiences that forced you to grow roots instead of branches. You aren't late. You are seasoned, tempered, sharpened. The world praises the young because youth is loud. But wisdom is quiet. Wisdom waits. Wisdom blooms slowly. And some of the most profound human transformations happen only after a long, quiet season of becoming, the kind no one sees. There's a reason ancient philosophers never spoke of timelines. They spoke of ripening. They spoke of unfolding. They spoke of the moment a person becomes ready, not according to society's clock, but according to their inner development. You've spent years thinking you were stuck, but maybe you were being shaped. Years thinking you were lost, but maybe you were collecting the pieces of yourself you needed for later. Years feeling behind, but maybe you were simply becoming someone who requires more depth than the average timeline can contain. Because some lives are not meant to unfold quickly. Some lives are meant to simmer. Some souls are meant to mature slowly until the world finally becomes ready for what they carry. And here's something most people never realize. Your delay taught you what early success never could. It taught you resilience, the kind that's built through silent endurance, not applause. It taught you clarity, the kind that comes from failing, recalibrating and trying again. It taught you humility, not the fragile kind that comes from weakness, but the anchored kind that grows from self-awareness. It taught you discernment, the ability to separate what is real from what is loud. And it taught you something far more important: how to identify what is truly yours to pursue. That knowledge alone puts you ahead of many who sprinted into lives that didn't belong to them. The world loves fast builders. But it forgets that fast builders often collapse under the weight of the very things they create. Slow builders, they endure because when your dreams finally rise out of the quiet, they rise with roots. This is why late bloomers often become the most powerful people in the room, not because they're louder or smarter or luckier, but because they've lived enough to understand what's worth building and what's worth abandoning. They've shed illusions, they've outgrown timelines, they've stopped measuring themselves against people who never walked their path. They don't need the world's permission anymore. They don't need validation anymore. They don't need speed anymore. They're building with intention, not insecurity. And here's the part that most people never see. The deeper you're becoming, the quieter it looks from the outside. This is why your life may feel slow right now, why it may feel invisible, why you may feel like you're dissolving more than you're rising. You're in the foundation phase, the part that no one celebrates, the part that won't get you applause, the part that won't look like success. But this part is where transformation takes its first breath, not in achievement, not in recognition, not in momentum, but in silence. Silence is where the stories you inherited begin to fall apart. Silence is where the old identities loosen their grip. Silence is where a new direction begins to form, one built on truth, not pressure. So if you're in a season right now where nothing seems to be happening, where you feel hidden, where your life feels like a blank page, good. It means your old self is dissolving. It means your next self is forming. It means you're entering the stage of becoming that precedes every real rise. And when you do rise, you will not rise as a desperate version of yourself trying to catch up. You will rise as someone who finally understands who they are, what they want, and why they were meant to bloom later. This is your season of quiet alignment. This is your season of recalibration. This is your season of emergence, just not yet visible. But it will be. And when it happens, your return won't be subtle. It will be undeniable. If this first part spoke to you, subscribe to the Quiet Paradox, because the next 2 sessions go even deeper into identity, reinvention, and the inner shift that prepares you for your return. There comes a point in every person's life when the outer world stops being the main source of pressure and the inner world takes over. It happens quietly. It happens gradually. And it often happens after years of trying to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. For late bloomers, this shift is even more significant. Because while some people grow through pursuit, you've grown through observation, through reflection, through collecting pieces of yourself you didn't yet know how to use. You weren't late. You were gathering. And now something inside you is beginning to stir, a faint but unmistakable sense that the life you've been living is no longer enough. Not because it's empty, but because it's incomplete. You can feel the edges of your next self forming, even if you can't fully articulate its shape. This is the phase of internal disruption, the moment when your old identity begins to crack, not from pressure but from expansion. Most people misunderstand this phase. They think life is falling apart. But what's actually happening is that your deeper self is outgrowing who you pretended to be. Sometimes this disruption shows up as restlessness, a quiet dissatisfaction with the familiar. Sometimes it shows up as clarity, a sudden realization that certain habits, relationships, or environments no longer fit. Sometimes it appears as emotional overwhelm, the kind that feels like something inside you is trying to speak, but you haven't learned its language yet. Whatever form it takes, it is always the same signal. Your inner world is preparing for transformation long before the outer world shows any sign of it. This is why late bloomers often look stagnant on the surface. Their lives appear still, uneventful, even directionless. But beneath that stillness, a shift is unfolding, a quiet reorganization, a realignment of values, priorities, beliefs, needs. The world cannot see this part of your growth, but you can feel it. And if you pay attention, you will notice something profound. Your inner world is not asking for speed. It is asking for honesty. Honesty about what you want. Honesty about what you've outgrown. Honesty about the roles you played to survive. Honesty about the dreams you abandoned for practicality. Honesty about the parts of you you have pretended not to care about. This inner honesty marks the beginning of a new chapter, not one defined by achievement, but one defined by authenticity. Because before a late bloomer rises, something important happens. They stop running from themselves. They stop performing. They stop pleasing. They stop trying to live on borrowed timelines. They stop chasing dreams that were planted by someone else's fears. And most importantly, they stop measuring their life by external milestones. At this stage, your focus shifts away from how fast can I grow and moves toward what am I growing into. This question is powerful because it forces you to confront your own patterns. Why did you hesitate for so long? Why did you doubt your timing? Why did you compare yourself with others? Why did you surrender your worth to the speed of your progress? And as you sit with these questions, something unexpected happens. You begin to realize that every delay in your life wasn't wasted time. It was formative time. The relationships you lost taught you boundaries. The failures you endured taught you resilience. The dreams that didn't work taught you direction. The years you spent wandering taught you awareness. The uncertainty you faced taught you depth. These are not lessons that early achievers often get, because early success can make people believe they've already become who they're meant to be. But late bloomers, you've lived enough to know better. You know that identity is not fixed. You know that growth is non-linear. You know that wisdom is earned, not inherited. You know that reinvention is always possible. You know that timing is deeply personal. And because of that, your next chapter will come from clarity, not chance. This inner clarity is the reason many late bloomers eventually surpass those who peaked early. Not because they compete harder, but because they understand themselves better. They enter their growth phase with precision. They rise with intention. They move with conviction. They build from alignment, not pressure. And that alignment is the real advantage, because when your timing finally matches your readiness, the world sees something extraordinary. A person who is no longer confused about who they are or what they want. This is why your rise will look different. It won't look frantic. It won't look rushed. It won't look like you're trying to catch up. It will look grounded, measured, intentional, unshakable. And it will be impossible to ignore. But before that rise happens, you must walk through one more phase. The most important phase of all, the reconstruction phase. This is where you stop living by the old identity and begin consciously sculpting a new one. Not based on insecurity, but on insight. Not based on pressure, but on truth. Not based on comparison, but on awareness. This phase asks questions that only you can answer. What do you genuinely value? What kind of life feels like yours? What environment supports your growth? What energy drains you or fuels you? What story are you ready to stop repeating? What story are you ready to begin writing? This is where your transformation becomes deliberate. You are no longer waiting for something to happen to you. You are happening to your life. You begin making choices that match your future, not your doubts. You begin saying no without guilt. You begin saying yes without fear. You begin protecting your energy. You begin following the pull of your deeper self. And the moment these choices begin aligning, something beautiful occurs. You stop seeking permission. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into lives that cannot contain you. You begin living with a quiet, powerful certainty. The certainty that your life is just now beginning to reveal its purpose. If this session resonated with you, subscribe to the Quiet Paradox, where we explore the rise, the awakening, and the moment a late bloomer finally steps into their true strength. There comes a moment in every late bloomer's life when the quiet inner work they've been doing begins to take shape. Not as a burst of motivation, not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a steady, grounded sense of direction. It feels different from anything before. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with clarity. This clarity is subtle at first. You begin noticing what drains you. You begin noticing what excites you. You begin recognizing patterns you used to repeat without thought. You begin feeling the difference between what aligns with you and what pulls you away from yourself. This is the moment when your inner world stops being a mystery and starts becoming a map. For the first time, you can see where you've been, where you are, and where you're meant to go. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel rushed. It feels natural, as if life isn't pushing you anymore, but revealing a path that was waiting for you all along. This is the beginning of your rise, but this rise doesn't happen through intensity. It happens through alignment. You're no longer running to prove yourself. You're no longer trying to meet timelines that were never yours. You're no longer seeking validation to feel worthy. Instead, you're moving with a deeper confidence, not loud, not showy, but grounded. A confidence built from knowing what you've survived, what you've learned, and what you finally understand about yourself. This is the strength of a late bloomer. Your rise is not impulsive, it's inevitable. You've lived through enough cycles to recognize what lasts and what doesn't. You've carried enough disappointment to appreciate fulfillment when it arrives. You've lost enough illusions to finally embrace truth. You've been humbled, shaped, reshaped, and sharpened by every phase you thought was a setback. And now, you're beginning to see the truth. Those setbacks were training. The relationships that broke you taught you the boundaries you now protect fiercely. The failures that embarrassed you taught you the persistence you now carry effortlessly. The delays that frustrated you taught you patience, the kind that makes your future more sustainable. The years you felt lost taught you the self-awareness you now use to make precise decisions. None of those seasons were wasted. They were preparing you. This is why late bloomers often experience a different kind of success. A success that is quieter, deeper, and far more stable. Not because they are more gifted, but because they no longer move from insecurity. They move from understanding. They move from intention. They move from presence. They move from alignment. And when a person moves from alignment, their life begins to rearrange itself around who they truly are. Old relationships fall away naturally, not through conflict, but through clarity. Old habits dissolve, not through discipline, but through irrelevance. Old fears lose their grip, not through force, but through awareness. You start to realize that the version of you who fell behind wasn't weak. They were unawakened. And the version of you who is rising now isn't new. They are revealed. Because your real strength was never missing. It was buried. Buried under expectations, buried under doubts, buried under timelines you didn't choose. Buried under comparisons that were never fair. But now that strength is coming back. Not in a rush, but in a return. A return to clarity. A return to purpose. A return to the truth of who you've always been. This is the moment late bloomers often feel something shift inside them. A kind of internal permission. A realization that says, it's finally time. Not time to chase, not time to compete, not time to prove, time to become. And becoming doesn't require intensity. It requires awareness. Awareness of what you're called to do. Awareness of what no longer fits. Awareness of who you are ready to stop being. Awareness of who you are finally ready to step into. This awareness becomes your anchor. And when you are anchored, life stops feeling like a storm and starts feeling like a current, something you can move with, not fight against. You begin to trust your timing. You begin to trust your intuition. You begin to trust your path. And trust is what transforms everything. You trust that your slower journey gave you depth. You trust that your delays gave you wisdom. You trust that your pain gave you perspective. You trust that your doubts made you question what was worth believing. You trust that your uncertainty prepared you for clarity. And now, standing where you are, with everything you've lived and everything you've learned, you are more prepared for your future than you've ever realized. This is what people forget. Late bloomers don't rise with noise. They rise with intention. They rise with depth. They rise with maturity. They rise with emotional intelligence. They rise with a sense of direction that early achievers rarely have. Your rise won't be loud. It will be steady. It will be aligned. It will be powerful. And it will last. Because you aren't blooming later than others. You're blooming exactly when you were meant to. Your roots needed time. Your wisdom needed time. Your identity needed time. Your courage needed time. Your clarity needed time. And now all of it is working together. All of you is rising. This is not the beginning of your journey. This is the beginning of your arrival. You're not late. You're right on time. If this journey resonated with you, consider subscribing to The Quiet Paradox for more deep, introspective philosophy and psychology videos that speak to the soul.